Everyone just give us a minute. We'll get started in just a minute. You want to go ahead and do all the slides as well. You want me to do the intro?
Right now?
Yep, we're ready to go. I think everyone's good.
Cool. Ready to go? Yep. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, and welcome back to another Realtor education series presented by Pineapple. You know, every month, what we like to do is bring on a valuable guest speaker and share some insight into what's going on in the market right now, what's going on in the industry, and make sure that all of us as professionals that work together in this space can have the best information that arms us to serve our customers. This week, we have an exceptional guest, a friend, but also a professional colleague, Avi Top, the founder of Top Law Firm. Welcome, Avi.
Thank you for having me. Nice to be here.
Avi and I are going to have a great conversation today talking about the legal aspects of real estate, especially what it means in today's environment. As you know, we're seeing things like vendor takebacks. We're seeing things like, you know, mortgage defaults on the increase. We're seeing things like contracts that have to be drafted with conditions, unlike, you know, previous years. But we're definitely going to have a long conversation about that kind of stuff. So just before we kick into today's presentation, and I'm just trying to get through a couple slides here, I just want to highlight that Pineapple's not just a mortgage company, but we're a community. And being a community, we feel that it's our responsibility to give back to the communities in which we serve. And in a variety of ways throughout the year, you'll often find Pineapple, our team, our agents, our staff, we're participating in a variety of different fundraisers and initiatives to really make lasting impacts on those communities. Well, as we head into the winter season right now, as the weather's beginning to turn, we've gotten a call out from one of the local schools here in the GTA, and they're in need of some winter coats for certain people. So right now, we're just running an initiative for the month of October right now, where we're collecting winter coats that are going to help those in need navigate through these Canadian winters. So if anybody has any coats or any, you know, warm outerwear that you no longer need, use, or have any use for, please feel free to bring it into the office, or we can arrange for someone to come pick it up. It'll certainly go a long way in helping others. We also want to invite you out to a fundraiser that we are hosting, and this will be benefiting the Canadian Cancer Society, a cause that is very, you know, near and dear to many of our hearts here in this organization, mine as well. But this is going to be a fun Halloween networking social event at Petty Cash, downtown Toronto, King West. Prizes for best costume. It's going to be a great night that kicks off right after work at 5, and we'll go into the, you know, later hours of the night. Feel free to join us. Scan that QR code up on the screen. We will be collecting donations at the door for the Canadian Cancer Society. Last time we hosted an event like this, we raised almost $10,000, and would certainly appreciate your support for that as well. And finally, before we kick off into today, I want to just remind everyone of Pineapple Exchange, which is the industry's leading education event happening this November 7th. Open invitation to all. It's a free event that we host in order to deliver a high level of education out to the industry. And we're going to have great speakers there, great information, and great knowledge sharing. All of that being kicked off by our keynote speaker, Drew Green. Many of you may know him. He's the CEO of Indochino, the men's apparel brand, which is today the largest retail apparel brand in the world. And he's going to be sharing a lot of business insight on how, you know, he and a lot of his learnings can help us grow as entrepreneurs and business owners. With that being said, thank you again, Avi, for joining us here today. You're going to be our title sponsor at that event.
I was about to say I'm going to be there. So
you're going to be there. And rumor has it you're going to be launching some sort of an exclusive promo at that event.
Yes, exclusive for Pineapple alone.
Amazing.
We've created a package with wills and estates, something that's a little added, you know, incentive. And
don't give it all away. Don't give it all away.
But something that's really gonna be really great for the Pineapple team. You know, we're Pineapple strong in our office, so we want to make sure to give you something.
Amazing. Sorry, what is it?
You just want to stop presenting.
Oh, cool.
Stop
Stop share.
share.
All right, cool. Let's jump into this conversation because we got a lot of great information that we
Sure.
got to talk about. So Avi, welcome.
Thanks. I
Tell
love
us,
it.
tell us a little bit about yourself. You're a real estate lawyer. What's your background? What's your history? What
Oh,
brings you to the
boy.
world of law?
Shuba, you should never ask a lawyer to talk about themselves because I will talk forever. We'll be.
Don't
there's
worry,
not
I'll
enough
cut, I'll cut,
hours.
I'll cut you
There's
off.
not
I'll
enough
cut you
hours.
off.
But so
Grab this computer and defend it.
so oh, you okay?
Go
Yeah,
for it.
I'm just gonna fix the screen.
Okay. So yeah, so off of what you just said, yeah, I'm a lawyer. I've been a lawyer for almost, well, let's see, I'm 51, so we're going on almost 2 decades now. A while back, I worked downtown in a Bay Street firm, and I didn't like that I wasn't engaging with clients. Like you never saw a client, you saw a screen, but never met anybody. And it wasn't for me. And so left that world behind. And then transitioned into doing other areas of law, barrister stuff, which you basically are in court. And of course, I like to talk. So that's where I did shine greatly. But then I realized, you know what? The real estate world was calling. So rebranded, launched Top Law Firm. Conveniently, that's my last name. So I guess we were destined.
Destined to be at the
Destined,
top.
right?
Destined to be at the top.
And we slowly started growing and bringing on team and
Amazing.
yeah, so
So-
that's what we are.
So real estate law, and you know, our audience today are industry participants, real estate agents, mortgage agents, you know, we obviously play active roles, but real estate law is actually so much more than closing a transaction that I've
so
come
much
to learn right over my
Absolutely.
career. And you know, you have enforcements, you have contracts, you have wills and estates, as you've
Right,
mentioned,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
What are like some of the areas of real estate law that people might not think are important factors?
Well, just off of what you just said, you know, we have, you know, a purchase could be coming in or a sale could be coming in. And let's say we're acting for one of the sides, it could be an estate home, right? It's the estate of someone who's passed and the, you know, the trustee or the power, or the POA or someone who's involved on that side of the transaction is listing that property and we're dealing with the estate. Or even on the other side, let's say we are, you know, the seller's lawyer and we are representing the estate. There's a lot of things to factor in when it comes to that, you know, when we receive the monies, who are we paying out to? What are we discharging, you know, mortgages? How are we divvying up the remainder of the proceeds? So there's a lot to consider in that type of situation. Also, you know, there's other situations, if it's a refinance, if it's if someone's taking a second mortgage, there's always many conditions that need to be looked at carefully prior to the transaction closing. For example, if they allow a second mortgage, let's say the person in first position doesn't allow a second,
Yeah.
right? These are a lot of things that you have to be, there's a lot of balls in play, a lot of, you know, things that we have to be aware of. So due diligence for a lawyer is paramount, you know,
Got it.
you know, digging a little bit under the surface, right? You don't want to buy a house and find out that there's a right of way on the property and you didn't know about it. And then people are crossing across your lawn to get to the beach,
Yeah.
or to the water. You don't want to be surprised.
Yeah.
So we always tell people, if you have the opportunity to speak to a lawyer prior to a transaction, yeah, take 2 minutes, you know, give us a call. I love those calls. Those are
Yeah.
the best. And, you know, we're never too busy to speak to someone and help them, educate them on a transaction, because at the end of the day, it's client retention. They're going to come back to us, right?
Yeah.
People come to you guys because you guys are the pinnacle when it comes to, you know, mortgages and getting the best deals, etc. So the smart or the savvy purchaser is going to speak to you prior to going out and looking at like a $2 million home.
Yeah.
See what they can facilitate, what they can afford, what are the rates? Should I go open? Should I go closed? I think this time doing your due diligence is paramount, and partnering with, you know, strategic partners or strong advocates, a good law firm, someone you know, it helps you, it makes you more comfortable in your purchase.
Yeah.
I find a lot of times people are stressed when they refinance, they take a second mortgage, they're buying a house, they're selling a house, they're stressed. It's so stressful. Actually, it's supposed to be the best time of your, you know, if you're buying something new, you should be excited. Right? You're buying a new car, a new shirt, something, you should be excited. You're selling something to make money to buy something else, you should be happy, not
Absolutely.
stressing. So I think that's where a good lawyer or law firm or something, someone you have that comfortable, relationship or that air between the two of you, that you can call them up and say, my friends call me Avi, I'm known as Abraham.
Yeah.
But all my clients call me Avi.
So you kind of highlighted on a few things there in terms of, lawyers are really looking at things behind the scenes that
Right.
a lot of people might not see on the outskirts. But you referenced a lot of people, right? So there's a lot of people involved in a real estate transaction, as we all know, right? We are many of those people, right? Real estate agents are involved, mortgage agents or brokers are involved,
Right.
appraisers are involved, title insurers are involved, default mortgage insurers are involved, lawyers are involved. List goes on and on and on.
Right.
So one of the questions that I have, and I'm sure our audience does, what's the best time for a real estate lawyer to get involved in a transaction, and why?
Great question. So, once again, going a little bit back to what I said earlier, to touch on something I said earlier, having, doing your due diligence, calling up a lawyer, calling up a law firm that does real estate law, like us, for example, and saying, you know what, I'm thinking about purchasing, or I have a home and I currently, I think it's worth $1 million, and I have a mortgage, a first mortgage with this company. And I need money to build a pool, or I need money to renovate my kitchen or whatever. Speaking to us and asking us these questions or giving us the scenario, we can actually help guide you, or guide the client, I should say, to put them in touch with certain organizations or certain brokers or appraisers or whomever. Because we see it. We're usually at the end of the transaction, right? So we see it all. I remember we wrote an article not long ago, and I was quoted in the article as saying, like, someone else asked me a similar question, and I basically turned it back to them. I said, if you were going to buy a car, your first car, right, and you were scared, and it's going to be a used car, that's how mine was, it was the first used car, and you were concerned you didn't want to buy a lemon, the smart, savvy purchaser would probably go to a mechanic and say, what car do you never see? Right. And, they would say, well, if you trust the mechanic, they'd say, well, you know what? Honda's a great car. I never see them in here. Right. I see this car or this brand. And so now, what, maybe I should be looking for a Honda. Right.
So I love lawyers because lawyers give great advice, right?
So
but
you're the one.
I'm the one.
Right.
It doesn't mean that everybody does.
Right.
So for our audience here,
Right.
And more importantly for our audience's clients,
right,
the people who are actually buying the homes,
Mhm.
Their clients are going to say, yeah, great, I would love nothing more than to get a lawyer's advice and opinion. But as soon as I pick up the phone and call them,
Right.
they got the stopwatch going.
Right.
And
Yes.
how much is this going to cost me in the
Absolutely.
end, right? So what's the kind of response that you would have to that?
So there are those lawyers, and it's true. That was an older traditional model. You pick that's where I was. You pick up the phone, and there's a little clock, and it's ticking, and it's saying, oh, spoke to this person 20 minutes, and then you bill them X amount of money if there's a retainer. And a lot of lawyers don't want to pick up the phone because of that, right? Because that's what we charge. That's what people are purchasing. They're purchasing the time and the knowledge. But that's back in the day. That's no longer the landscape, at least not for us.
Okay.
So I'm all for like giving that time, right? If it's not 3-4 hours you're spending on the phone, I think everyone would understand that. But if you're taking 20 minutes out of your day and you're speaking to someone and giving them a hand, I don't see that as a detriment to you. I see that as a positive. So my answer to that is yes. If you're calling up a law firm and they're saying, we'll make you an appointment and we need a retainer of X amount and blah, 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 blah. Then yeah, maybe continue looking.
Yeah. So essentially what you're saying is in today's world, clients shouldn't fear
absolutely
getting advice, getting guidance. But more importantly, what I'm actually hearing is the importance of the right team.
Absolutely.
The right realtor, the right
Yes.
mortgage agent or broker, the
Right.
right lawyer, and
Right.
all working in unison towards driving towards that
Exactly.
closing.
I'll put it to you this way. Everyone in their walk of life, they know somebody who's a mechanic. They know somebody who's a dentist, who's a doctor, who works in a certain profession. So, they're sitting at the dinner table and they say, oh, you know what, my tooth is hurting, or I got a flat tire or something like that. And the other person will say, well, you know what, I know Sue's husband is a mechanic. ask him where the best, let's text him now and ask him where the best place to go to buy a tire is. So they reach out and they go, where's the best place to buy a tire? And they'll say, oh, you know what? Joe's down the street. He has the best deals for tires. That's what I find, most families or most people will do. They'll say, well, do you have a connection for this? Or, I'm thinking about traveling to this place. You've been there. What do you think of it?
Yeah.
Right? Get their opinion. That's the best. The best recommendation is a referral, personal
Always.
referral.
Always.
And if someone says to you, oh, that lawyer or that organization, don't go to them, then
Yeah.
don't deal with them. If someone's related, and has a relationship with that lawyer or law firm or doctor or whomever, they'll say, you know what, I trust that guy or I trust that young lady.
Absolutely.
She gave me some good advice. They steered me wrong. I would have been paying more on a mortgage, but he found me a better rate. So I think it's wise.
So let's get into some of the details, some of the nitty gritty of what
Sure.
you do and some of the information that I know our audience wants to hear. So I'm just going to start off, very easily. Today's landscape is anything but easy. Let's be very
yeah.
frank, right? We're seeing high interest rates.
Right.
Borrowers are having difficulty qualifying. Sellers aren't getting the prices they need. Borrowers aren't getting the prices that they want. Stipulations, details,
Right.
everything is going on right now. So from a legal perspective, in working with your home buying team, what do you see from your side of the fence that can ensure helping get that client to a smooth closing?
Right. Oh my God. Well, there's so many factors. First and foremost, I think in that relation, or even in our neck of the woods, what anyone wants is they want clean, easy communication, right? They want to know what's going on in any relationship or field or business. They want to know what's going on. So they want to be informed, what do you think? Should I buy this purchase? Should I refinance? Is this a good rate? What are your thoughts? So that communication, that quick communication, that seamless communication, I think is paramount. So if you can deliver that to your clients and be able to relate to them and speak to them, that's the best, because you're building that trust. They're trusting you. And at the same time, that's also why they'll come back to you. So we want to deliver that as their lawyers. I know you guys here at Pineapple deliver that also to your client base, because they're going to come back to you. They're going to build that relationship with you. They're going to end up saying, you know what, I bought a house today, or I refinanced this house today. I'm going to maybe buy, when rates change, I'll buy another home. And again, you'll be getting that retention. So that's the advice I would give. Build that relationship. Also, educate oneself, right? Education is so paramount. The rates and everything and the landscape's changing so quickly. Like, look what happened over the last year with rates increasing. You turn your head, boom, right? It's another Bank of Canada, another rate increase. So you have to be constantly aware of what's going on in the market, in the landscape, etc. You need to know what's happening. If you don't know what's happening, you're doing yourself and your client an injustice, because they're going to be like, well, the worst is that they say, well, did you hear about this? And no, what are you talking about?
Yeah, absolutely.
You need to know what's happening in your own business.
So some great tips there. And I'm thinking of, our agents and the work that they do on a daily basis in terms of, collecting documents and information
Right.
and things of that nature. So when working with your mortgage broker agent or working with your realtor partner, is there like some sort of a logistical assistance that we can offer? Like, is there ease of information transfer, or can we get
Right.
you docs that'll help close that deal or help even
Absolutely.
ensure that, problems are caught before they arise?
Sure.
What would some of those be?
So we utilize 2 or almost 3 methods, right? There are agents and brokers who are more traditional, right? They're a little bit old school, maybe an email, maybe they'll want to drop off some papers. And we get that, and we want to adhere to their comfort level, because if that's what makes them feel comfortable and allows the transaction to close smoothly and efficiently, we'll do it.
Yeah.
At the same time, we do have, the whole tech and being able to email or, go online or through our app. We have an app, you can put in documentation, and we will do our due diligence on our side to ensure that everything is within compliance. So you have to ride the line. I think the good law firms, and like, I've said this before, we're not the biggest law firm out there. We're actually, more of a boutique, but I like to think that we offer, probably, once again, not to pardon the pun, but like a top tier of service to our clients, to our agents and brokers, to be able to ride that line between the two schools, so to speak, where they can have that tech if they want it, and they can have that traditional method. Regardless, the team leaders on our side and, our clerks, for example, and our lawyers on our side, our redundancy that we put in place, no other law firm does, because it's very expensive.
Thanks.
And our profits will be far less than a traditional law firm, because we'll spend that money to have that redundancy. Like on every email, there's two lawyers. On every email, there's two team leaders, two clerks. Nothing can be missed, because we want to make sure that the transaction and the communication with the clerks and the brokers and the agents is, there's no lag.
Amazing.
Right,
Amazing.
so-
So as early as possible, as much information as possible,
Correct.
and as many people as involved as possible
You got
is
it.
really what we're working towards here.
Yeah.
So speaking of documentation, I know one of the big things, obviously, from a legal aspect that you're reviewing and looking at in real estate are contracts.
Mhm.
So I want to talk a little bit about contracts, and I want to talk a little bit about it from two perspectives. Okay, so main contract that you guys are probably reviewing, obviously, is the purchase and sale agreement, right?
Purchase sale. Yeah.
So I want to tackle this from two perspectives for our audience. Today's landscape is very different, right? And those contracts today matter, where maybe over the last decade, they didn't as much,
Right.
right? If that's a fair statement to say. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that it doesn't matter, but over the last decade or so, when real estate was
Right.
on the upward trajectory,
Right.
you could be a little more lenient and still walk away. Whereas today, every line, every detail, every
Oh.
condition matters. So let's talk about it from the perspective of people who are purchasing new homes, new
Right.
construction homes,
Okay.
which is a big challenge that I'm seeing, and I'm going to elaborate a little on my question. And let's also talk about it from a resale perspective.
Okay.
So part A, let's talk about it first from the new homes perspective.
Okay.
So I'm sure many of our audience, many of our viewers, our clients, when they're reading the paper every day, some of the things that they're seeing are people are choosing to not close on their properties.
Right.
People are unable to qualify for financing on properties that they've
Right.
purchased years ago,
Right.
right? Builders are litigating against it.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas in some cases, builders are even saying, okay, give it back and selling at a profit, depending on when it
Right.
was,
Right.
almost eagerly anticipating
Right.
that client can't qualify for the financing anymore,
Right.
right? So from a new home perspective, whether you purchased it years ago or purchasing it today,
Mhm.
what are some of the things that you would highlight to be
Mhm.
cautious and cognizant about? And what are you looking for when you're reviewing that contract?
Right. So there's not enough time in this show to actually
Yeah,
go
yeah.
over everything. But on a new purchase, let's say you're purchasing something, it's a pre-construction, it's not built yet, it'll be a couple of years from now. When you go in, you have a 10-day cooling off period. You're taking those materials, you've signed your paperwork, you give maybe a first deposit check perhaps, and now you take that documentation, or you've spoken to your realtor who's maybe brought you to that builder, and you're taking that documentation now to your lawyer of your choosing. Some lawyers will charge to review that document, because it's not a small document. It's quite a lengthy agreement of purchase and sale, especially pre-construction. And some lawyers may charge you a fee for that. We'll waive that fee if you're closing with us. So there's traditionally a fee, but we'll waive it if you close with us. And we'll review it. And we provide the client basically a breakdown of what we reviewed and what we found in that document. Is there additional costs for an assignment, for example? Let's say you're buying it and you want to sell it before you close on the transaction. Well, some builders will say, yeah, no problem, you can do it. But where we really shine is we actually read the fine print. Yes, we are nerdy. Yes, we are those those people, and we'll sit there and we sweat over those contracts, because we look at it as though it's our purchase. So we want to see what are the little hairs, little loopholes that maybe are not being drawn to the purchaser's attention that they should know about. So that's why we want to meet with the purchaser prior and ask them, what are you intending to do? What's your long-term goal? You want to buy it to rent out? You need to be aware of between occupancy and closing. Are they going to allow you to do that? That's another issue. So there's going to be many, many issues that we'll go through with the client and that agreement. And we try to give them enough time during that 10-day cooling off period where they can take that information back to the seller and say, look, include these items for me. Or if the seller says, no, I'm not going to, they can back out of the transaction, no harm, no foul. So that's in a pre-construction, let's say, new build type of situation. On a resale type of situation.
Let me just ask a
Oh,
quick
sorry, go
question
ahead.
before we jump
Please.
into
Yeah,
resale,
yeah.
just on that note. What about people who are closing today on pre-construction? So that's
Right.
great for someone who's buying today.
Right, yes.
They'll have a chance to, get in front of you
Right,
for free. You'll look
Right.
over their contract as long as they're closing with you,
Right,
right? And
right.
and you'll be able to protect them. What about the people that purchased 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago,
I love
and
that.
the, almost 60,000 units that are closing over the
Right.
next couple months just in the GTA alone?
Right,
What do they do if they can't qualify? Or
Right.
if there's a stipulation that they can't have a tenant in occupancy and
Right.
occupancy fees are through the roof because of interest rates right now?
it's a crazy time. So
What are we doing in that
the,
case?
the sad news is that they, 3 years ago, they
Should have
should have
talked to
had,
you.
well,
Yeah,
they should have
yeah.
had a lawyer review, like most of them will have had a lawyer review that. If their lawyer for some reason missed that, well, the ship has sailed, so to speak. They can come to us, we'll still take a look at, let's say another lawyer reviewed it, maybe that lawyer has closed his or her practice, retired, whatever have you, they've just had a change of heart. And they've come to us and we notice something, we'll bring it to their attention. We'll say, yes, this is now an issue, or it could be an issue for you, or what have you. Or if they can't close, they may come to us and say, look, I can't close right now, but I may be able to close in 2 months from now. So we'll write to that other lawyer or that other law firm, and we have great relationships with a lot of builder firms. We actually act for a few builders ourselves. So we'll reach out to them and say, listen, is there a way we can maybe extend this closing? What penalties are you looking for? What are you looking for as, like, can we just keep, the statement of adjustments as is and just pay maybe a small penalty to go towards the purchase price, right? We have all intentions to close. There's many ways that you can approach a transaction, even a new build transaction that's closing immediate, and still find a remedy. The last remedy you want to enlist is not closing at all. Because you can go back to 2008, you go back to 2017, April 2017 with the NRST and how the market took a swing. You can go back to even more recently when the interest rates went up. Yes, when those things happen and people can't close, it's horrible because the courts have said, and this is coming from a barrister's background, not many solicitor real estate lawyers have a barrister's background. We do. We know that if a person can't close, they're still subject to those costs and legals, and they're on the hook. And if the seller sells at a loss, that's not good for the previous purchaser. So we want to find a way, and that's when we give you guys a call. For example, we'll tell the client, look, reach out to you guys at Pineapple. Yes, the landscape has changed with the financing, but maybe they can find something temporary to bridge the gap to get you to close. So then in a year from now, when the rates change, you're in a good space. Once again, it's those associations, those connections that I think benefit the end purchaser.
Yeah. There's generally always a solution.
There's always a
willing to look
solution. You
for
just
it,
got to
right?
find a middle ground
Yeah.
that's not painful for the client to allow them to navigate the storm and just get to the next port.
Okay, so short answer is, albeit that the solutions may not be as, easy to find,
Correct.
people who did purchase years ago, if they're having difficulty, nonetheless, they should speak with you, speak with their lawyer, and
Absolutely.
navigate that because there are options available.
Absolutely. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, yeah, moving into resale then.
Right.
From a resale perspective, there's two sides to a resale, right? There's the buyer's side and the seller's side.
Right.
So if we start with the buyer's side, last few years have been interesting, right? And mortgage agents were against it, lawyers were against it, the firm offers, right?
Right.
No condition of financing, no
Right.
condition of appraisal.
Wild West.
And we get it, right? We understand that there wasn't always options around it.
Right.
But in today's world, we're obviously seeing a pivot. So from a buyer's perspective and from your legal perspective, what should buyers and their realtors be looking at in drafting a purchase agreement to be able to protect them and,
Right.
the current market?
I love this question. So I basically will always turn it back in a way to like if a buyer came to me and said, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? Who should I speak to first? I will send them here, I'll send them to Pineapple, I'll send them to an agent saying, look, see what you can afford, because those conditions also, it depends on your situation, on what they're purchasing. But let's say they are purchasing a resale home and it's really priced very attractive, especially with, let's say, this market, it's priced very attractive, and they want to go in and they know that there may be another offer at the same time. Well, you want to go in with your best foot forward. If you're going in with no financing, know ahead of time that you have the financing. Know ahead of time that you have the rate that you want. Because if you're going in, it's like I said, it's not, 3-4 years ago where you could go in and, the rates were like 2%, 2.5%, 3%. Everyone was laughing, money was flowing. Now it's a little bit more dangerous. So you may want to have that condition for financing. You may want to have a condition for inspection. Now you have to be, like I said earlier, you have to be savvy. You have to know your product, you have to know what you're purchasing, and you have to have that strong connection with those other faculties that you're working with, your mortgage broker, your realtor, etc., your lawyer. So yeah, conditions in that regard, like putting in certain conditions, now a lot of people are selling properties, for example, not a lot of people, but people who are selling properties, some of the properties they're selling are tenanted, right? Are you prepared to assume this tenant? If you assume this tenant and you want to get rid of them, how long is that going to take you? What are the steps that need to be taken? Can you put a condition for the current landlord to provide you the property with a vacant tenancy with no one in there? So these are things that, you could come to a lawyer, speak to a lawyer and say, look, I found this house. This is what I want. What do you think?
Yeah, and that's
Right?
that's a really big one, and a great one that you
Huge.
bring up, right? Which a lot of people never think about. They're buying a property that's an investment property.
Absolutely.
So in today's market, one of the things that we're seeing on the mortgage side of the fence is if people are going to sell properties, they're often going to sell their underperforming investment assets first, right? We're not going to sell our principal residence as the
Who
first
would?
one, right?
Who would?
So many Canadians own multiple real estate properties. Some of them may be underperforming, cash flow negative, variable rate payments have gone up,
Right,
whatever it might
right.
be. So these clients are looking to sell their investments,
Mhm.
but they got a tenant in there.
Mhm.
So what is the circumstance when somebody buys that property and
Right.
there's a tenant in there? Do they
Right.
have to evict that tenant? Do they have to take that tenant? Like what's
It all depends once again on what's in the agreement of purchase and sale. So if it's, as is, where is with the tenant, you're purchasing and you're closing, hey, you got yourself a new tenant. And you're right. Who's gonna really report on having a bad tenant? I haven't really seen many deals come across my desk where we're acting for the purchaser and they say, oh yeah, I'm buying this property, there's a tenant in there, and the seller tells me the tenant is horrible. They've missed a lot of payments. They're
they're
currently
the
not
best tenants
yeah,
out there?
you're never going to hear that story. There's never going to be that kind of transparency. You're always going to hear the opposite. Best tenant, never missed a payment. This is the best property.
So as a buyer, you don't get a chance to
So-
vet that tenant if you take them over.
Well, you're taking on what the agent that you have or the seller's agent is representing. So, unless you have, their NOAs, their T4s, statement of, what's in their bank accounts, a current letter from their employer, you don't know what you're getting, right? It's a mixed bag. You have no idea. So, caveat emptor was the first Latin term I ever learned in law school was buyer beware. So you have to be educated. You have
Mine's
to be,
carpe diem.
oh, carpe today, of course. But that's the idea, right? So going back to what I said earlier, yes, speaking, getting a little bit, schedule your walkthrough when you want to go to the open house or you want to take a look at the property prior to your purchase. Say, you know what, I'm okay with the tenant being there. Right? Speak to the tenant.
Yeah.
Get an idea of what you're dealing with. Because yeah, if it's a property that's generating great income and it's doing really well, why would you sell it? Everyone has this reason, but
Yeah.
just be cautious.
And do you recommend in those scenarios that the seller evicts the tenant prior to taking possession?
If you want, so this is just an opinion, it's not advice, but I would always prefer that, right? I would always prefer it to take it clean, empty, and I can do my own due diligence and put in my own tenant.
Or
maybe-
live in it.
Or live in it, or what have you. Maybe the market rates have gone up, maybe they've gone down, for rent. So these are things you maybe want to change it.
Yeah.
Maybe you want to make it into a two apartment.
And
property.
for a viewer's knowledge, if
Mhm.
you were buying a property that
Mhm.
had a tenant in it.
Mhm.
And you didn't assume the property, or sorry, you didn't get the property vacant prior to closing,
That's your tenants.
but your intention is to move into the property,
Okay,
you're not moving in on day one, I'm guessing.
you're not moving in on day
So
one.
what's the process there?
So normally what we would say is, and we do have paralegals in our office, that you would enlist their services and they would go through the eviction process to get rid of that tenant to allow the new owner to occupy that premise. So there are forms and it's through the landlord tenant board that they would have to comply with to get that tenant out. But once again, that's a process, that's a timeline, there's a cost to that you should be, taking into consideration prior to the purchase.
Yeah,
So, looking up that property and seeing what's going on there, it's good to know, behind the scenes, what's happening. So you're not just going in, like we said earlier, it's a different landscape from years before, where you could go in and say, the purchase price is great, my rates are great, I can live a few months without this house, I can manage 3, 4, 5, 6 months
yeah,
with that current person in there not paying rent. That's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
Conditions now are paramount. They were paramount before as well. I'm not going to say they weren't
Always,
important. They're always important.
critical now.
Yeah, we always like to look at all the conditions, and we will always advise our clients, especially if they're going in before they've, given that deposit or they've sent the deal over to the seller, to confirm it, everything's ready to roll. We had a client just recently. He's a repeat client of ours. He's great. He contacted me. He said, "Listen, Abby, you know what? It's another property I want to buy. Take a look. This is my agent. Put in all the conditions. What do you think?"
Yeah.
I read through it. I said, "Oh no, throw in this, throw in that, additional conditions. What's the worst they say is no,
Yeah,
right?" They came back. They said, "Absolutely, you got it." So now he's laughing. It's a good situation for him. I know it's going to close smoothly, easily, no problems, no headaches, no garbage left behind, no tenancy, no nothing. And that's for him. That's the best situation, right?
great feedback. Just on the topic of tenants, many of our clients and many of our audience here represent clients that are property investors. Probably many of our audience are
Right.
property
Yeah,
investors
so, yeah.
themselves.
Mhm.
What is, again, in the current landscape right now, owners are obviously impacted by high interest rates and the
Right.
impacts on their mortgage payments, but we often don't think about those that aren't mortgage holders and their impacts, but they're certainly impacted. They're
Absolutely.
impacted by higher cost of living through groceries, higher
Absolutely.
rental payments. Their unsecured debts have gone up, lines of credit and things of
Mhm.
that nature.
Yeah.
I'm sure that we're probably seeing a lot of landlords not getting their rental payments on time
Oh,
right
yeah.
now,
Oh, yeah.
right? What advice do you have from a legal perspective for those situations where our clients are property investors themselves that are
Right.
having challenges right now with their tenants?
Right. So that's a hot topic.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you've been watching the news recently with all
I
the.
come readily available with questions.
Oh yeah, no, I love it. I love it. So that's a hot topic. Every night you'll turn on the news and you'll see, depending on what news station you're watching, but that's very widespread in downtown Toronto with a lot of the larger buildings. They're asking for rent freezes. They're asking to enlist new protocol that the states currently have in place right now, where you can't just increase your rent, or it should be frozen for prolonged period of time as it relates to recession and inflation, etc. So my advice to those landlords is, if you find that you may have to weather the storm, because if you've agreed to a term with your tenant and it's the lease just started and the rates have gone up and it's affecting how you run things, well, we have to deal with it. There's good and bad on both sides. When the market's good for the landlords, you don't see the landlord it's complaining. So, and I'm a landlord too. I know how it feels. But at the same time, if you can't afford the property, you may have to sell the property too to circumvent your losses. It's tough. I've been a tenant also. Like I said, it's tough being on. You've seen both sides of the fence. There's not always an easy answer or a blanket answer to cover every scenario. Every scenario, in my opinion, is a little particular to itself. But given the landscape right now and what's going on, a lot of landlords who don't have like the major complexes, they'll work with their tenants. Actually, I shouldn't even say that. Every landlord will try to work with its tenants, right? Finding a good tenant is very hard. Finding a reliable, good tenant is extremely hard. And sometimes you get rid of one, you don't know what you're getting with the next. So you want to try to weather from with them, right? See if there is a mechanism out there that allow you to, get to the next point, explain to them the situation.
So what happens in the circumstance that you can't? And I'll paint a picture.
Sure.
And I'm just going to tell a little story before I paint this picture. I have a friend
Right.
that owns.
Everybody has a friend.
Everybody has a friend. I only have one, unfortunately, but no. He owns multiple investment properties.
Sure.
And in the midst of COVID, he had a bad tenant, unfortunately.
Right.
And the tenant decided, I'm not going to pay.
Mhm.
And it took a long time to get to the landlord-tenant board
Absolutely.
for a hearing. And that whole time that tenant wasn't paying, he
Mhm.
was making thousands of dollars a month in mortgage payments
Mhm.
to ensure that he could upkeep that property.
Mhm.
After all this was over, he
Mhm.
told me that almost bankrupted him. He
Absolutely.
was very concerned. So my question then becomes, what happens in the circumstance?
Mhm.
High rate environment, we're dependent on rent as a landlord to be able to pay our mortgages.
Mhm.
Tenants not paying our mortgage anymore. He's a good tenant, she's a good tenant. We're trying to figure this out.
Mhm.
What's our recourse, and what recourse does the lender have now? Because I'm reliant on that income to pay you.
Absolutely.
So they're not paying me. Now I can't pay you.
Absolutely.
I got to get you involved to figure this out. Like, what are we all doing? What's the team doing?
So there's not really a clear-cut answer, at least in my opinion, there's no clear-cut answer. That scenario that you just described, that was during COVID, that was everybody, right? That happened across the board. And just to be clear, there is no reason to not pay rent. They still have to pay rent. The remedy available for someone who's not paying rent, for a landlord who's not receiving rent, is eviction. Yes, COVID was, worldwide pandemic. No one had ever seen anything like that. So as far as I'm aware, the landlord tenant board, especially here in Toronto, was backlogged. They didn't do Zoom meetings. There was no remedies in place. So they couldn't really facilitate, everything was shut down.
Yeah.
So they couldn't really facilitate evictions. And then when they got back, back up to speed, it was a backlog, right? Which I'm aware now that there is no backlog. So it was a bad situation. Going forward, what can you do? Once again, speaking to those people, speaking to the parties involved, trying to facilitate a reasonable exit for that tenant, during COVID, not to transition or to go on a tangent, but it was right before, I could be mistaken, it was very popular when the market was great. They were doing cash for keys.
Yeah.
That was a popular term, right? For those of you viewers, they can Google it. It was really popular when the market was hot and prices were just like this and rates were low, and you wanted to sell a property and you had a tenant. The tenant would be like, well, and you want to sell it vacant because maybe you get up more money as for a vacant tenancy.
Yeah.
The tenant would say, I'll leave, but I want $25,000. And a lot of landlords back then were paying it, right? When they really didn't have to, like it was pretty much extortion.
Yeah.
So, it's a funny world with landlords and tenancies and multiplexes and, investment properties. But I feel like there's a theme emerging here, which is, know what you're getting into, know what you're dealing with, know what you're purchasing, know your tenants, know who if you're going to be renting, even
Have a good lawyer.
have a good lawyer, have a good mortgage broker, and have a good lawyer.
So I want to make sure I cover these last two topics before we run out of time. We were kind of just speaking obviously about what happens if a tenant doesn't pay, can't pay their mortgage. Now I want to preface this by saying I'm not overly concerned about this, but I do want to talk about this topic of mortgage default.
Right.
And what's going on in the world
Right.
today. Now, I want to preface it. So yesterday, actually, I was speaking with 5 of the CEOs of the largest mortgage lenders in Canada.
Mhm.
All of them telling me that default is not a concern. And just to quickly share, especially in speaking with the CEO of Home Capital, Yusri Basada, he was saying that his book of business revolves every 14 months on average. So
Right.
every single one of his clients today, or in the home trust, home capital portfolio today, were clients that are no longer from the lower interest rate days. They're all paying higher interest rates
Right.
right now. And he's seeing record low defaults, so he's not concerned.
Mhm.
Now, we can talk forever about how and why, whether that's savings absorption, whether that's, just people
Right.
not going to default on their principal residence, which is, the case of many Canadians. But I feel that it is important for our audience and our viewers to understand what the mortgage default process looks like and the enforcement process looks like,
Mhm.
because, there's always a lot of words thrown around, power of sale and foreclosure,
Right.
but nobody really knows what happens, right?
Right,
Is
right.
it off of one payment? Do
Right.
I have to miss a certain amount of payments?
Right, right.
Could you just walk our audience through what the default process kind of looks like?
Right.
And
Sure.
what leads to a power of sale or a
Sure,
foreclosure?
sure. So every lender may have a different mechanism in place for if someone defaults. Let's say they don't make a payment, they don't make their first. If it's a private lender, if it's a lender, a bank, B lender, etc. So if they don't make one payment, or if they're going to make miss a few payments, some of the smart borrowers will contact their lender and say, because of COVID, because of this, I need some time. I need, can we work something out? The smart borrowers or the smart lenders in that regard will contact their borrowers and say, I saw you missed the payments. Are you going to miss the second one as well? Maybe it's time to reevaluate what your mortgage is. Maybe we can pull some equity out for you, or refinance, do something to give you that breathing room. But as far as process is concerned, yeah, after they've missed their few payments and that lender has said, okay, look, this is not good. There's that communication and we have one of our lawyers here even today, who does a lot of our enforcement work. They will communicate on behalf of that lender. Hey, you know what? To the borrower, or to the solicitor for the borrower, or the borrower direct, and say, this is what's going on. We will have to start, foreclosure proceedings on this, unless you can bring it up to term, unless you can bring it up in good standing, your mortgage in good standing. Sometimes that communique actually is worth it, because they mean, oh, I was away, I was ill, I was this, I was that. Let me see if we can remedy, or once again, the good lawyers, I think, will offer a solution, right? Because it doesn't benefit, I was speaking with some, larger banks the other day at a seminar, and the best phrase I heard was, we're not in the business of foreclosing and purchasing property. That's not our business. We're in the business of lending money, right? We don't want to own tons of real estate. And it made sense. That's not their business model, to foreclose and do power of sales.
And how long does a client have to bring that mortgage up to date, as you mentioned?
Well, once again, depending on the lender, it can range, it can be 45 days, it can be less, it can be more, depending on that particular lender. But once the process starts, it starts. At any time, depending on the lender too, they could, that borrower can say, hey, listen, I've sold my other asset, I have money now, let me pay it off. And of course, that lawyer or our lawyers would communicate with them and say, okay, well, here's the account. This is what you need to pay. Sometimes they say, well, can we work around, certain fees and certain interests and, et cetera, disbursements. And we'll communicate with the lender and we'll say, are you guys prepared to, can we resolve it? Right.
And how long does this process typically take? Like a full enforcement, a power sale, or a foreclosure?
Once again, depending on the situation, it can be under 30 days, it can be a little bit more, but it all depends on the particular situation, at what point, on how far they've defaulted, and how far into the policy they've defaulted. So, but I'm a big advocate of trying to find a resolution between all parties instead of sending it straight to litigation, straight. I don't think, in some aspects, we are in a little way, we're almost like the anti-lawyer in some ways, because a lot of lawyers or law firms may want to, this is the process, it's black and white, this is how it's going to be, and we're going to go for.
You sound like the anti-lawyer, you don't charge when you're reviewing contracts, you're helping clients. No, it's fantastic.
I'm going to get a lot of emails about other lawyers. Someone's going to,
no,
what are you doing?
I'm just bugging you. So I wanna make sure that we provide an opportunity for anyone to ask any questions, but I have one more topic that I think is important that I wanna
Sure.
make sure that we ask here. So we've talked a lot about, just contracts, law, legal process, enforcement, all of these great things that matter. One of the things that we haven't talked about is protecting that that liability, protecting that mortgage and that asset that you're about to get into.
Mhm.
And I know as lawyers, it's not just always about closing the sale or
Mhm.
closing that transaction. Your documents, your title search, your legal paperwork,
Right,
etc.
right.
But you had briefly kind of talked about wills earlier.
Mhm.
What is the importance of wills in a
So,
real estate transaction?
so once again, personally speaking, and even just from personal experience, I think it's paramount. For example, and I'll explain why. Um, we had a young couple coming in to buy a house. Okay, their first home, they've been renting, they're newly married, the wife is pregnant, so it's a new purchase. At that time, they'd never considered, purchasing a house and needing a will. When people purchase a home, they can purchase it in one of two ways, as either joint tenants or tenants in common, one of which has the right of survivorship. Okay, so two people are purchasing a home. Let's say it's just they're purchasing it for an investment, for investment purposes, right? Joe and Steve, whomever, are just buying it they want to buy it, renovate it, rent it out. That's fine. They may buy it in a certain way where something happens that one of their shares goes to their family, correct? Joe and Sue, or the husband and wife in this particular situation, they're buying it. They want to make sure that if something happens to one of them, it falls to the remaining spouse, surviving spouse. So it's easy to register the property in that way. However, a will is paramount, I think, also because it makes that transitional period a lot easier. It ensures that that property will fall to the surviving spouse. Pardon the pun, getting your house in order, getting your affairs in order prior to a purchase or even after a purchase, I think is so important. You're buying a big asset, like a piece of real estate is the biggest purchase you're going to purchase in your life, right? It's more than a car, it's more than anything. So, you're smart enough to get insurance for your car. You'll maintain your car, you'll take it for an oil change, you'll do whatever you need to do to make sure the car runs well. Take 2 seconds. A will, home insurance you pay monthly or yearly for as long as you own your home. You're going to have, fire, theft, etc. A will, you do it once. It lists your home as one of your assets, so you know where it's going to fall at the, God forbid, that day when that happens. Person passes away, and you pay for it once, and it sits, and then you revisit it maybe every couple of years, just like when you would change the batteries in your smoke detector.
Yeah.
You revisit your will, say, has anything changed? Have I bought a new property? Have I had another child? Maybe I want to make, them an heir to, this property I own. So it's not a bad idea. Every time something changes in a person's life, not a bad idea to revisit a will. So is a will important? Absolutely. I think if you own a piece of real estate, you need a will.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing.
Pleasure.
Well, in the few minutes that we have remaining, I do want to offer an opportunity for any of our viewers or people in the live audience here to get some free legal advice. So if you have any questions for Avi at Top Law, I'd love to open the floor up.
Everybody would love to hear, how can you avoid probate?
So I'm just gonna repeat the question because we got the mic up here. So the question was from the room here, how do you avoid probate in the situations where there wasn't or was a will?
So you can't. That's the short answer. Definitely, like, once again, every situation may be a little different, depending on how the property was registered, depending on if the person's on title. Maybe they're not on title and they have a will. Maybe they didn't have a will and they are on title. That's where I would say, and catchphrase or whatever you want to call it, call a lawyer. Right? Call up the lawyer, call, myself, call, Stefan from our office, call Renard from our office, call any of our lawyers, Amanda, and just, put that question to them. Say, I have a situation. My client purchased the property. They don't have a will, or my client helped put money down towards a property. They never were on title, but they do have a will and they've passed away. how can we get them, rights to to that property or their share of that property? And then the lawyers, once again, at no cost to you, will sit down with you and say, hey, let's take a look. Send me a copy of the will. Send me, let's pull title. Let's see what's registered on title. How was the property taken? Was it taken as joint tenants or tenants in common? So there's a lot of little things that need to be looked at to ensure that if probate is needed or not needed.
Great, thank you. I think we got time for one more question, if anybody has one.
Wow, it's quiet. Either we've answered all of their questions
For
before they've
sure
asked
you've
them.
answered it. For
or-
sure you've answered it. But you know what it is? As soon as we finish this call, everyone's gonna ask you their own
Absolutely,
personal
yeah,
question.
some people, I get that a lot. Oh, sure.
Okay, one more
Charge
question.
for closing.
Question is, how much do you charge for a closing?
So, we actually, I think, given a preferred price, if I'm not mistaken, to Pineapple agents.
Yeah.
So, I think what we'll do is we'll send out all those materials, to all the Pineapple agents, for you to have your price list readily available.
Friends, pineapple.
And friends. of
Always,
Pineapple.
always. Friends are everything to us. So with that being said, I think we're out of time. Oh no, we got one question online. Okay, we got time for one question.
What's your advice on avoiding mortgage title fraud when my house was illegally transferred to another owner?
Oh my.
Oh, that's a great.
Do I have to repeat that one or that one's on the chat?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, so just once again, how do you avoid fraud, essentially?
Yeah.
Okay, so first and foremost, when you purchase your property, and if you purchase the property with a mortgage, you have to have title insurance. It's paramount to have title insurance. Most lawyers, or all lawyers, will be recommending, if you're buying a house with a mortgage, to have title
Most
insurance.
lenders will require.
Well, the
this.
lenders are gonna require it. I haven't seen a lender yet who hasn't required it. And that title insurance will help navigate through should somebody become a victim of fraud, and we've seen this, right? It'll help them recoup the loss of the fraud. But there is an investigation process that does have to take place. Whoever the title insurance company is, they'll want to do their due diligence as well. They'll contact the lawyer who did the closing. They'll contact the brokers who've helped facilitate the mortgage. They'll contact the realtors, and they'll do their own investigation before they write a check, right? But these fraudsters are getting very savvy. And I guess, once again, back to the underlying theme of this episode is, do your due diligence. If someone comes to you, find what channel did they come to you? Was it just off of your website or through an email or, through a text message? Do you know who these people are? Was it a referral? These fraudsters are getting so smart. They're going out. I'll give you a great story, an example where we caught a fraud where, a person goes out, the fraudster, and they're a team. This is great. They're a team. Okay. They go out, they scan properties for rent, expensive properties. And they say, oh, here's a beautiful house. It's $3 million. It's for rent. They want, $4,500 a month, comes fully furnished. Then what this fraud team does is they go out and they pull title. They say, does this house have a mortgage? If it doesn't, even better. So now what they'll do is they go in and they pretend to rent this property, or they want to rent this property, and they'll give first and last and maybe even 1 month security. Now they have a copy of the lease. They have a name of the owner. They may even have the signature of the owner. They know that there's no mortgage on title, and they go out and they contact a mortgage broker, maybe somebody new, maybe a mortgage agent who's new, and not a Pineapple person, because Pineapple gives great educational seminars. They tell you what to look for, but a competitor. And that new agent says, oh, terrific. Yes, Mr. Smith, what can I do for you? And they say, I need small mortgage. Maybe it's under $75,000, so they only have to use one lawyer. And they say, I need a small mortgage. I just want to renovate my kitchen. I'm retired. I'm this, I'm that. They've also, part of their fraud team, they've made some fake IDs, but really good ones. And now that mortgage agent fills out the paperwork and it's like, yeah, it's no problem. Small mortgage, it's 12 months. We'll take you with a private. We'll make a large interest rate, and we'll send an appraiser. They knock at the door. Who answers the door? The renter, the fraudster. He's there. He said, come on in. They look around, and it's the crystal chandelier. There's furniture everywhere. It looks normal. So it passes mustard and they say, yeah, for this rate, for this amount, it's going for a short term, we'll lend you that money. Right? Now, if the smart lawyer did their due diligence, like we do, I just learned this word the other day. I have a 14-year-old, creeping. We do a lot of creeping, which I guess now that's the current term, but in my day it was called investigating. So we'll do some searches. We'll see if that property was ever, for rent. That's a red flag for us. So, but in this particular case, let's say they didn't, then what would happen if title insurance was purchased and all our transactions, even the ones where they are cash purchases, meaning there is no mortgage, we still advise all our clients to take title insurance. Because if in the event something does get missed by us, or if in the event it's even missed at the title insurance fraud department, which every title insurance has their, retired lawyers, 5, 6, 7 of them in a room, which are looking through transactions. If it gets past them, then title insurance will do their investigation. If they see it was it got past everybody, they'll pay out the fraud.
Great. Well, on that note, and great conversation, great answer. So I'm very sorry to have to do this, but I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So on that note, wanted to thank you once again
so
for
much
joining
having
us.
me. I love it.
Hope that you all found value in today's webinar and in today's presentation. A lot of great information. Avi's information is always available. Please reach out if you'd like to contact them personally or privately. And we wanted to thank you all for being a part of this event, as well as many others, hoping to see many of you at our Halloween event, Pineapple Exchange, supporting our coat drive, and the others that are happening throughout the year. Thank you all once again, and I hope that you have an incredible day.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Great.
you.
Yeah.
Great job, man.
I love it.
Yeah.
This is really good. I thought we were gonna do like a big dating game, kiss goodbye.
Oh,
Remember that?
you can't.
Was it good?
There you go.
Oh, thanks.